Okay, so we're back and we're going to keep reading because some of my kids in class are like, hey, we need to finish the story. Imagine that. Okay, so the latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal. We're talking about his cats or his pets. Entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. So this cat was really, really smart. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mention the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered. So this whole paragraph, he's giving you a physical description of the black cat. It's large, beautiful, entirely black. Sagacious, again he's using that word. He wants you to know how wise the cat is. And then he tells us, and not only that, but my wife, she's tinctured with suspicion. She has a little piece of suspicion that black cats were witches in disguise. Now, I said before I used to have 2 black cats and now I have 1, and I had to fill out some serious paperwork. Oh my gosh, I'm sweating buckets. I had to fill out some serious paperwork to get the black cats. And I realize now because I guess the area that we live in, there's some rituals going on and they do this huge check. And so it's not unknown for people to have feelings and visions and ideas about black cats being negative or witches. Okay, so he also says, I'm only telling you what the cat looked like and that his wife once thought it was a witch, just because I just happen to remember it right now. And now we hear the name of the cat, and Pluto. Well, if you know who Pluto is, he was the ruler, and I have to get my story turned around here, of Hades. And Hades is that underworld, like how in Greek mythology they explained the world around them is they use the myth to explain, Hades is the dark, the devil, or evil, and it was the underworld, and they controlled things, and then there were the good gods who controlled other things. But he happened to name the black cat's name is Pluto. And here you thought it was all happy from Disney World. Isn't that ironic? But it's not. This was the cat's name. Was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Now, I'm a cat person, and I have a cat that will follow me everywhere. So if you've ever been a cat person and you have that cat who would just literally, our cat follows us all the way around the entire block, which is like a mile circle, and she comes the whole way. She's black, and she is not afraid, and that's what he said his cat did, and I completely, that's like the one paragraph where I could say I agree. I get it. I get what he's saying here. This is just more indication of what Poe and the narrator is trying to let you know, that he's just normal, and so is the cat. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of fiend intemperance, which is basically drunkenness, I blush to confess it, experienced a radical altercation for the worse. So what did he just say? He said that, let me get back up here. He said that their friendship, meaning his and the cat, lasted for several years, during which my general temperament and character, because of my alcohol and the way I abuse myself, I blush to confess. Why does he blush, right? When I blush, it's usually not to confess anything crazy. It's more like oh, did you really say that? How sweet of you. So he's blushing to confess experienced a radical altercation for the worse. Okay, so for no reason whatsoever, because I was drinking so much, I became radically altered for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered to myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. So now he's saying that every day he just got worse and worse and worse. Now he's not even nice to his wife, hitting her. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog when by accident or through affection they came in my way. So, you know, when the dog comes near you and you're in a bad mood and you might like accidentally walk into the dog, but you just, maybe I would bend over and be like, oh, poor puppy, I didn't mean to step on your paw, or whatever it is. He's saying that he wasn't nice to his wife, and he wasn't nice to any of the animals, and Pluto is the only one who kept him from mistreating him. And if anybody, the monkey, anybody came near him, they got hurt. So animals, they have a sense, right? They know when to stay away from. They know which people to bark and growl at and which ones not to. So, but my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length, even Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. So now here's where we find the major spiral downward in this rationalization of why the narrator is being put to death tomorrow. So he blames, first of all, he's blaming it on alcohol. And now he's about to tell you where the house is about to get really, really baroque and bizarre. One night, returning home much intoxicated from one of my own haunts about the town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, when in his fright at my violence he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. So, you know, have you ever grabbed an animal and they kind of like, you're surprised and maybe they nip at you, but then they realize it's you, right? This is what the cat does. So he comes home drunk, much intoxicated from his haunts, another haunting word that he chose to put in there, the author, Poe. And, you know, the cat was staying away. Fancied the cat avoided my presence. So he seized him, he grabs him, and the cat bites him. Good for you, Pluto. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a more than fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fiber of my frame. That's a lot of description for how he wants to hurt the cat, don't you think? Look at that. The fury of a demon, instantly possessed me. He knew himself no longer. His original soul, wow, he's going really deep talking about his soul. What the heck is he talking about, right? Took flight from its body, and fiendish again, we've got that terrible malevolence, devilish, terrible gin. So we know his liquor of choice is gin. Here's the word that just kind of makes me go, perverse, right? Thrilled. Thrilled. When you're thrilled, I don't know about you, but I'm usually at a concert and I hear really good music, or I'm like the top of the Empire Strikes Back, the Empire State Building, or maybe, racing a race car. Those things are thrilling, but for a demon to come up and overtake my body, I wouldn't be thrilled. That's not the word I'd be feeling, but that's what the narrator feels. And what does he do now? I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grabbed the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from its socket. I blush. I burn, I stutter while I pen the damnable atrocity. Now, you might not know what atrocity means, but I think you've got a feeling by now that it's something horrific. And what better way to delve deep into some evil words than to read a little Poe, right? And then some of the word work that you should be doing with words that you want to learn better is you can go, and I already have this on my website, and you can pull up this trusty little word map, and let's say we're putting atrocity here. See, I have a method. If you put the word atrocity here, yeah, these are all evil words in the Poe story, you know, they're not the nicest words to have to learn, but you're eventually, when you do work with words, you have to follow ways to get the word in your brain. So you'd put the vocabulary word here, follow the steps. 1, 2, the sentence or phrase that you got it from the text you were reading. 3, this is the definition from the dictionary. 4, I'd spend more time on the 4s and the 6s. I hate the dictionary definition. It's the one for me that's just the too much information. I like a synonym better, and I like for you to do a lot of related words or other forms of the word, because then you realize the root has so many meanings, and if you can dissect the root and figure out the root, you can get all these other words in your vocabulary. And of course, the antonym is a great one, because then you'd get the opposite of all these horrible words if you did this for every Poe word. So that's on the website, and it's called Word Map. Okay. All right, so we were at damnable atrocity, and this is a public school, so yes, I'm allowed to teach this. Goodness, I know somebody's out there going, what is she reading to my child? You know, the boys love the gore, and the girls, they're fine with it. Okay, so here we go. When reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment, half of horror, half of remorse, for the crime of which I had been guilty. But it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. So now we have, okay, first it's wine. First it's gin, now it's wine. He kind of has some remorse. He kind of wakes up horrified. But then he's like, no, if I have this, I have this equal feeling. And they equaled out, and he says, so he remained untouched. There's a movie that comes to mind. When you're making connections in texts, you can connect to anything. You can, and if you, this is a card that I, like my students to have when they're reading. You can connect what you already know from another text. You can connect what you already know to something in yourself. You can connect to the world, or you can connect to other media. When I read this paragraph, the media I think of is this movie called Vanished. And it's like Sandra Bullock's very first movie appearance. And it's one of my favorite actors, and right now, Jeff Bridges. And the whole reason behind this movie is that he did this really good deed once when he was young. He rescued someone in a drowning. And then he, as an adult, wanted to know, how horrible is this? He wanted to know what it felt like to do the exact opposite. So he kidnaps this girl and buries her alive. That's what the movie is about. It's a freaky movie. And here's the thing. I hate horror. I don't go to see horror movies. I was afraid of Scooby-Doo when I was a little girl, and Poltergeist and the clown in the closet. Oh no! So why I get such a thrill out of reading it, I don't know. And it's probably because Poe is such a good writer, and because I'm such a dork and I like reading. I don't know. But I don't like scary things, and really thinking about too much of this. Because if you look at what this story is about and why Poe would write it, why would he want to write a story about a murderer who has no remorse? I mean, come on. I don't want to know that person. But then again, we have that happen. We have that in universities. We have that all over the world. We have that in front of our faces, people who have no remorse and do the most horrific things. But we're supposed to be this society where we're very intellectualized, you know? We have computers and we have iPads and we have databases and, you know, even back in 36 when this was written, 53, I forget. I'm terrible with numbers. This was a huge concept even back then, you know, to say, you know, he's giving you his perspective on good and evil. And he's telling you, they're both even. That's what he's saying here. And I get all of those thoughts out of just that one little paragraph. Isn't that crazy? But my brain has different experiences and knows different things about good and evil, and I have my opinions and about souls and remorse and horror. And, you know, however you can connect to any text, whether you're summing it up, predicting it, questioning something you don't understand, connecting it to what you already know, fabulous. That's what you should be doing. And you should be allowed to write on a text. I always circle my favorite parts. When I'm done and I want to come back to here, if I were in a regular classroom, I would write BRB, because we all know what that means, right? Be right back. So, you know, if something makes you laugh, write it. You know, if something makes you go, ah, or a lightning bolt goes off in your head, or whatever it is, write right on the text. That's what I do, and I can't even draw, you know. But you have to interact with the text in order to get it in your brain. So, you know, when teachers have you taking notes, there's science behind this, people. You know, we just don't make it up. And I know as a reading specialist that if you want a text to come alive for you in your brain, you have to be having a conversation with it, basically. You're like thinking of what you're thinking while you're thinking it. And if you keep reading when it stops making sense, don't do that anymore. You have to stop, back up, and make it make sense. And I'm going through, my black cat really wants to get in here. I think it's hysterical. Okay, moving right along, and I'm going to read. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, an appearance frightful, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. When he went about the house as usual, he went about the house as usual, but as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. So here he is again. He's just so twisted and demented. So the cat's ignoring him, and he's peeved about it, right? I would be ignoring you too, buddy, if that was me and you were my owner. So he's mad. He's a little irritated, right? But this cat used to love me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, so now he's annoyed. And then came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. So he's saying, only now that the cat's mad at me, now I'm going to be perverse. You thought I was bad before? Wait till you see what I'm going to do next. And that's what Poe puts it in all caps, because he wants you to know, don't even think what I've said so far is perverse. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to get worse. Of this spirit, philosophy takes no account. Yet I am not more sure than my soul lives that I am that perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart. Cue gasp. So he's saying that no matter who you are and how you were born and what you believe, he thinks that everyone has this primitive impulse to be evil. How dare you, Poe? One of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which gave direction to the character of man. He's saying that these primitive impulses of the human heart have been the feeling and part of the character of man. Right? On purpose, Poe does this to make you go, what are you talking about? Who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or a silly act for no other reason than because he knows he should not? I grew up in the 70s, and boys back then did weird things with, like, frogs and lizards and firecrackers. And I think when I'm reading that part, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is that text to self. Oh, he's talking about, I used to chase the firecracker boys. Like, leave that lizard alone, right? And I used to think, who would want to blow up a lizard, right? But then you read about it in the paper. So that's how I connect right there. I don't know how you connect, but that's what comes to my mind when I think of, like, he's saying that people do things just because they want to, because they know they shouldn't. Have we not a perpetual inclination in the teeth of our best judgment to violate that which is law merely because we understand it to be such? Let's take it down to an easier level to comprehend if you don't get the blowing firecrackers in the mouths of frogs is cool. Or cool. How about just you speed in your new speedy car just because you want to, even though you know you're not supposed to go faster than the 55 on the sign? Same thing. In Poe's eyes, it's the same thing, right? You break the law just because you want to break the law. This is what he thinks, right? He's justifying and rationalizing his loony, insane character. Okay. And capital L for the law, making it holy, italicized. He's got more italics coming up. So, the spirit of perverseness, I say, came to my final overthrow. So this feeling of evil came, and my final overthrow, that's like he just waved the white flag, that's when he just gives up. And it was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, saying, I couldn't help myself. This was in my character. I was born this way, to vex itself, to clean itself, to get itself out. That I came to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only. That urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. So he's saying it's this inclination that made me want to consummate, perfect. Consummate is to make perfect, to finish the job on the cat. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes, with the bitterest remorse at my heart. Hung it because I knew it had loved me, and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense. Hung it because I knew that in doing so I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. So, he's basically saying he could not, where's my pen? He could not help himself. He had to do the thing he wasn't supposed to do, because isn't that in every man's mind? Okay, keep moving on. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. A conflagration is a fire, and even if you didn't know that, look at the contextual clue to help you out. The destruction was complete. We've got flames. You can know that's what it means just by looking at it and pulling apart the surrounding words. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. So only then, resigned is given up, to quit something. from here on out, thenceforward, to despair. So only now that my house burned down, only now will I be in despair. Not because my soul has been gone for a long time, my cat's dead. No, just because my house burned down. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity. But I am detailing a chain of facts and wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. So he's going back now and he's saying, I'm just telling you a story of cause and effect. I can't really tell you how one caused the other, but I'm just going to tell you in a chain of facts, cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity. He has no idea, but he's just telling you a chain of facts of things that happened. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. You know, that's the place of the burnt down structure. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I had attributed to its having been recently spread. So, he's saying that the middle of the house is still there, right? The middle of the house is there, and standing there, rested by the bed, was a wall. Okay? And about this wall, a dense crowd were collected. So a dense crowd means there's lots of people gathered around this wall. And many persons seem to be examining a particular portion of it with very minute and eager attention. So what are they examining on that wall that's left after the fire? The words strange and singular, these are exclamation points. I don't know if they're coming through well. And other similar expressions excited my curiosity. So this is his bedroom where he murdered the cat, and he's walking by and people are gathered around and they're exclaiming things, and he's excited with curiosity. I don't know if that's how I'd be. I'd be like, oh, what's going on? I wouldn't be excited. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope about the animal's neck. There's a rope around the animal's neck. Let's pause there for 1 second. So there's a rope hanging around the animal's neck, because we know how it got there, right? When I first beheld this apparition, an apparition is like a ghost, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. But at length reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, by someone of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through an open window into my chamber. So I want you to see. This is one long sentence, and it's one long sentence of saying, oh yeah, this is what happened. The tree was fallen down. The tree, which is where the cat was hung, right? Somebody must have saw the fire, cut the dead cat down from the tree, threw it through my open window and into my chamber. His chamber's his bedroom. Does that sound like logic to you? This had probably been done with the view of arousing me from sleep. So not only did they do that in the first place, that's the first thing I would think of, is let's get ourselves something to cut the rope down from the tree, and then we'll throw it in the window and we'll wake him up. That's what he's saying. This had probably been done with the view of arousing me from sleep? No. The fall of other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty in the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the lime of which, with the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had then accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. So he's saying that somebody threw the cat through the window, and the cat hit that plaster, which was for some reason not dry, and the wall fell on it, and the fire and the heat. You know how you make pottery and it gets shaped, and he's saying that, and then the cat must have burnt away, but it left the shape. That's what he saw when he got there. Although I thus readily accounted to my reason, if not altogether my conscience, for the startling fact I just detailed, it did not the less fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. So he's saying, even though I just reasoned how it could happen, it still bothered me. He's saying, it did not the less to make a deep impression upon my fancy. It made him wonder. For months, I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and during this period there came back into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed, but was not remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me, among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented, for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. So what he's saying is, although it's not reasonable, right? And it just came to him that he fancied the cat, and he can't stop thinking about the cat, and now he's trying to find another one to replace it. Half sentiment, half feeling, like he's starting to feel maybe it was remorse that I did that to the cat. One night, as I sat, half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object, reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin or of rum, which constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. Now, a hogshead, and I wish I had my kids' cards, and I brought them to FAU to show my teachings, the students I'm teaching, the teachers I'm teaching, and I left them there. But a hogshead is just a big old barrel of, whiskey. I'll make it a Jack Daniels. They soak them in there, and he's saying his furniture in his apartment that's what a lush he became after this cat incident, is he didn't even leave the house anymore. Remember before he talked about his haunts about the town. Now he's just in the house, and the furniture are these empty hogsheads of liquor. Okay? I've been looking steadily at the top of the hogshead for some minutes, and what now caused me surprise was the fact that I had not sooner perceived the object thereupon. So standing on the end of this barrel, I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every aspect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body. But this cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white covering nearly the whole region of the breast. So now we know, is it Pluto coming back from the dead? That's my cat. It's a terrible cat. It's not Pluto because this cat has a splotch of white. I always have students say, it's Pluto came back. But no, if he was all black, it's not Pluto. It's just another black cat. Upon my touching him, he immediately rose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search, and I at once offered to purchase it of the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. That's a little spooky, but that's what he wants you to think. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. So he's saying, not only did I pet the cat, but when I started to go home, he wanted to come with me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. Okay, I'm so surprised that that's happening. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but I know not how or why it was. Its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed me. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty, preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not, for some weeks, strike or otherwise violently use it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing, and to flee silently from its odious presence, as from the breath of pestilence. Pestilence is disease, and it's the disease of the black plague. It's, it carried very easily, and he's saying odious presence, odious odor. He's saying that he couldn't even look at the cat, and the cat to him was like walking death smell. So he's building and building and building what's about to happen. We have not yet reached the climax of this story. We have done tons of exposition and tons of character building, tons of setting building, but we have yet to know what's the climax of the story. And Poe wants you to keep reading in order to figure that out. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it had also been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who, as I have already said, possessed, in a high degree, that humanity of feeling which had once been my distinguishing trait, and the source of many of my simplest and purest pleasures. So remember in the beginning of the story, he said he was docile and calm. He's saying his wife is still like that. I wonder if his wife would be that calm, if you're that much of a drunk and your wife is still hanging around all calm and docile. I don't know. Seems fictitious to me, but we can keep moving along. All right. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. So he's saying the more I dislike this cat, aversion is you want to stay away from it. It grosses you out. The more he tried to stay away from the cat, the more the cat wanted him. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Pertinacity is like stubbornness, right? These are words that I did in previous videos. You know that I had a cat like this once where he would trip me when I was walking. He wanted to go in between my legs so much that I would literally trip on him. And so that's what I think text to self when I read that the first time. As I said, I thought of Nicholas, my cat Nicholas, who would like follow me everywhere. And this is what this cat is doing. So is this cat a smart cat? Not knowing what we know about the narrator, he's not. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. Loathe is to hate. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down, or, fastening its long and sharp claws in my dress, clamber in this manner to my breast. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from so doing, partially by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by absolute dread of the beast. So now he is really, really losing his mind, because not only does this cat, who is obviously a sweetie, not only does this cat smell like death to him, but he's afraid of the cat now. He's dreading the cat. He thinks the cat's the devil or evil, and he doesn't know what to do. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. I am almost ashamed to own, yes, even in this felon's cell, so now we know he's in jail. There he is behind the bars in jail, telling us his story. I don't know if that's jail or not. So we know he's in jail. I am almost ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive. So he's saying that this tiny little thing that I'm about to tell you was more terror and more horror was brought about and inspired in me because of it. My wife had called attention more than once to the character of the mark of white hair, of which I have spoken, and which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. So remember that the cat had like a chest, and he said that the cat had like that white little spot. Let me make my kitty for you. So he's saying before in a previous paragraph that that cat had a white splotch, and that was the only thing that made this cat different than Pluto. So the reader will remember that this mark, although large, had been originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, meaning you couldn't see them happening, like microscopic, they're so small, and which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful. So he's rejecting it. His reason's rejecting it. He doesn't believe it himself because he's thinking it's made up. It's fanciful. It had at length resumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. So he's saying that that splotch, which used to be just a blob, right? That white splotch that was a blob, now has rigorous is like curriculum that's rigorous. It's really difficult, very exact. Distinct is very, very distinct. It's very like it's one of those. It's just couldn't think of a word. It's very exact. It's very precise. That's the word. Outline. So now this splotch, it was now the representation of object that I shuddered to name, and for this, above all, I loathed and dreaded and would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now, I say, the image of a ghastly thing, of the gallows. O mournful and terrible engine of horror and crime, of agony and death. Now, if you don't know what the gallows is, I just draw you a little hangman there. But in old times, the way you were killed often was by the gallows, when they just like, my kids actually have a really strange game on the iTouch thingy where you can like put your finger in there. I don't know, I made them get rid of it, but it was there. So I think, when they beheaded people or they chopped parts off, they used the gallows. So he's saying that on that cat, in that splotch of white, it now resembles the thing he's about to die by the next day. And now I was indeed wretched beyond wretchedness of mere humanity, and a brute beast whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed, a brute beast to work out for me, a man fashioned in the image of the high God, so much of insufferable woe. So he is saying, poor me, I am now suffering, woe is me, right? And he's saying he was made in the image of God. And he is telling you how terrified he is of this cat. During the former, alas, I neither by day or by night knew I the blessing of rest anymore. So he's saying that it didn't matter what happened from that sight when he realized what was on that splotch and that it resembled the gallows. He never slept again. Neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of any rest any more. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, meaning in the daytime, and in the latter, meaning in the night, I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off, incumbent internally upon my heart. Right? This is Poe continuing to rationalize. The narrator is rationalizing. He cannot sleep anymore. This is why what's about to happen happens. He can't sleep anymore. The cat, he wakes up. If he did try to get some sleep, he wakes up and the cat is right here, and the cat has got his hot breath in his face. beneath the pressure of the torments, because of all the pressure of these torments, only because of these things, such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbs. So he's saying feeble is weak, and remnant is like a scrap. If you want a remnant of carpet, you can get some places to give you a little scrap and you can make rugs out of it. So he's saying the weak scrap, the little piece of good that was left in him succumbed, meaning died, right? Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the dark and most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things and of all mankind, while from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of a fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most unusual and the most patient of sufferers. So here is his excuse to not only am I terrified of the cat, but there's not any good left in my body, and I am so furious. My uncomplaining wife has been suffering patiently this whole time. One day, even though I'm acting like I'm insane, and even though I'm doing things that are insane, one day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs and merely throwing me headlong exasperated me to madness. So there's that cat following him again, and he's going down the stairs, right? He's going down steep stairs. Now, that's a reason I'd get mad at my cat, too. I'd be like, get out of my way, Nicholas. And I'd probably yell, and my voice would make the cat scat, right? Not the narrator. No, no, no. That's not what he does. Uplifting an axe and forgetting in my wrath, Uplifting an axe and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which of course would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I'd wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded. When you're goaded, it's like when you've been picked on and picked on and picked on, and then you finally fight back, you feel like you were goaded. You know, like when a cat gets knocked back into a corner, that's when you don't want to corner a cat. He's saying I was goaded, I was cornered, right? Goaded by the interference into a rage more demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and I buried the axe in her brain. She fell upon the spot without a groan. Right? Are you guys in class still? Is anybody there? Ah! Right? To make you go, gross! Oh my gosh! Okay, now that's the climax, right? Hello, what could happen next? Is that the climax? What could possibly happen? The hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith with entire deliberation to the task of concealing the body. So now we know he's really crazy, because not only did he get really mad at the cat and almost put the cat to death with the axe, but then he grabbed his wife's arm and just put the axe in her head, and now his entire deliberation and process now, conceal means to hide, he wants to hide the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. Oh, he's so rational, right? Many projects entered my mind. At one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. And I think to myself, I think of Charles Manson, and I think of Jeffrey Dahmer, and I think of all the horrible monsters that are in the world, and I think of maybe they got this idea from Poe, and maybe we shouldn't let children read Poe, and then I think to myself, and that's what Poe is trying to say in the first place, is if I can write about it, it could happen, right? But just because I wrote about it doesn't mean it has to happen. It takes the criminally insane, perverse mind to make it happen. And how did we as a society get so many people with perverted, criminally insane minds? It's because we didn't take care of them in the first place when they were in school, right? So I can't say to children, you can't read Poe, because maybe you'll get an idea from reading it. Oh my gosh, what would we do if everyone did what J.D. Salinger did, right? Ban every book. Don't let the children read. Don't let them. Send them to China where they're not allowed to even watch this video. Anyway, here we go. I digress. At another. So he's saying all he's doing is, he's thinking what's he's going to do to get rid of the body. Ugh. And I, of course, think of Lacey Peterson comes to mind, and Kaylee comes to mind. Anyway. At another, I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again, I deliberated about casting it into the well in the yard, about packing it in a box as if merchandise, with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house? Huh? Crazy. He's mad, right? Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. There you go, narrator. He's so proud of himself. Not only did I go through all this list of great ways I can conceal my dead wife's body, but, hello, I found a far better expedient. Expedient, expeditiously. That means that's the easiest way to take care of something. You want your server in a restaurant to be expeditious. You want your doctor to give you test results expeditiously, and you would submit your assignments to your teachers in an expedient manner. However, when you're burying your dead wife, I don't know if a far better expedient word is expedient. Anyway, for a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed, and it had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a false chimney or fireplace that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the whole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. So what he's telling you is in the wall, there's this part of the wall that instead of a recess in the wall, it's like a protrusion out of the wall. And he's saying he can take the bricks out of there, stick the body in there, and then, plaster it back up. And nothing would look suspicious, because we wouldn't want to get caught because we're crazy. Next. And we're almost finished. In this calculation, I was not deceived. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while with little trouble I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. Having procured mortar, sand, and hair with every possible precaution, I prepared a plaster which could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I carefully went over a new brickwork. So he made this concoction that made, you couldn't even see the work, right? You couldn't even see what had been done. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor was picked up with the minutest care. I looked around triumphantly, what a happy word, and said to myself, here at last, then, my labor has not been in vain. Right? So we see that he's completely insane in the membrane, right? He is crazy, mad. He wants you to know what a good job he did finishing the task, right? What a good guy. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. So he's not afraid of the cat anymore. He's ready to just get rid of it. Had I been able to meet with it at the moment, there could have been no doubt of its face, but it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. So he's saying, oh, the cat got smart, and the cat went away. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the deep, the blissful sense with which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. So when you're talking, someone says in their bosom, go ahead and laugh, boys, giggle, giggle. It's in your chest, so he's like saying that he had blissful. Blissful is like when you're in love, like everything is perfect, right? He had this blissful sense of relief that the cat was gone in his chest, right? It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus, for one night at least, since its introduction in the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept even with the burden of murder upon my soul. So, 'cause the cat's gone, not 'cause my wife is dead, buried in the wall, but because, and Poe likes burying things, by the way, because the cat is gone, even with murder on my soul, I could finally get some sleep. Because you know how important sleep is. The second and the third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster, in terror, had fled the premises forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. These are all exclamation points. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but of course nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secured. Felicity, in Spanish, felicidade, significa happiness. So felicity means happiness, right? Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of police came, very unexpectedly, into the house. Something's about to happen, unexpectedly. Because remember, these are mere household events, as he's telling you, and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the premises. So now we've got a hard investigation happening. Secure, however, in the inscrutability, if something's inscrutable, you cannot figure it out. It's difficult. However, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment where he hid her, I felt no embarrassment whatever. The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. So he's saying, I'm so comfortable in my hiding place that I'm just going to go along and walk around with the officers. Oh, yes, come look here, come look there. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. So they've gone down into the cellar 3 or 4 times. They can't even remember, right? 3 or 4 times. They went down into the cellar. I quivered not a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. Totally calm. Only a psychopath, crazy person could be calm, right? I walked the cellar from end to end. I folded my arms upon my bosom. I roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart, glee is happiness, was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say if but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. So he's saying that there's something gleeful about getting over one on somebody, getting one over, and I guess a real criminal or a real liar gets some kind of satisfaction when they trick somebody, and that's what's happened to Poe. So he could not restrain himself. He had to just say, by way of triumph, prove his guiltlessness. Gentlemen, I said at last, as the party ascended the steps. So the guys are on their way out. They're on their way up. They ascended the steps. I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. So he's saying, I'm glad that you don't find anything here interesting to look at. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house. In the rabid desire to say something, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. I may say an excellently well-constructed house. These walls, are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together, and here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane with which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom. So he basically says, "Oh, gentlemen, you leaving so soon?" And he bangs with his cane. And here's the climax here. And there's no resolution except the one you make in your mind. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch fiend. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb. By a cry, at first muffled and broken like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony, and the demons that exult in the damnation. Woo! Look how long that sentence is. Hello, Poe. Hello, Poe. That's one. No, sorry. I beg to find error in your ways, Miss C. We didn't start there. So he's saying that when he rapped on, my dog's going to bark or something, I shouldn't do that he heard a voice that was muffled at first and broken, but then somehow it got louder and it was a scream. What could it be? Of my own thoughts, it is folly to speak. Swooning. So when you swoon, you're about to fall down, right? You're about to faint. I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless, though through extremity of terror and of awe. So all the men who were on their way out, going up the stairs in the previous paragraph, stopped motionless. They're in terror, and they're in awe, and they're probably thinking, what the heck was that? In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. To toil is to work hard. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red, extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb. Dun, dun, dun. The end. That's it. Isn't it a lovely story? Don't you just love Poe? Poe uses contextual clues to keep his reader to keep reading. He uses everything a good writer uses, and we'll be touching on those in the weeks to come, all in preparation for that writing exam that we're all going to do so well on this year. Ready? All right, I have to just say, I love my little kiddies in class right now who stayed with me and read with me on this beautiful floor today when they could have been anywhere else, because this is completely volunteer. So thank you guys. Much love to you. Thanks for coming. And we'll have more videos in the weeks to come. Bye. Don't forget to check out my website, brainstorm1101.com.